Good afternoon, and welcome to the Wednesday afternoon conference call with Trusts Unlimited. This is Jim George speaking. I'm the non-attorney spokesman and facilitator for Trusts Unlimited, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this call, particularly those of you calling in for the first time and those that will be listening to the replay over the next 24 to 48 hours. We like to move quickly through these calls to the extent that we can and bottom line the information for you. I'm going to try to do a full call today. As usual, I got a notice this morning about a conference call starting at noon that I'd like to participate in, but in as much as I will not be here next week, I'll be on vacation. I'm going to try to do a full call today, and if I can't get in on the other call, I'll just have to track some folks down and see what transpired. Today is August 3rd, and I hope we're getting close to the end here. First, by way of disclaimer, Trusts Unlimited is not the purveyor of the dinar and these other currencies. We're not advocating either the sale or purchase of these currencies, but as rather substantial currency holders ourselves. We're sharing with you the information we believe to be relevant. Of course, the most relevant piece of information would be a window for the potential reinstitution of the dinar. While there are certainly complications that we're dealing with right now in Iraq, in my opinion, the reinstatement of the dinar could literally happen at any time. We've gotten that far down the road. So let's talk a little bit about the situation in Iraq. And, of course, the first glaring obstacle is the continued stalemate in Parliament. However, the caretaker government is just proceeding with business as usual, and it's pretty difficult for members of Parliament to complain about that until they get their own house in order. As a matter of fact, there have been some statements released recently by caretaker Prime Minister Kazemi and a couple of members of the CBI that are calling for a change in the exchange rate. Now, many people reasonably argue, well, that could mean going from $14.50 to $11.90. It doesn't necessarily mean a reinstitution and revaluation of the dinar. However, in the case of Kazemi's statement, he specifically referred to the former glory days. So that is an inference to the rate of 322, which is where the currency was when it went into a program rate, which means that they probably start with a 1-to-1 with the U.S. dollar at a reinstituted in-country rate, moving to a global revalued rate, in my opinion, probably closer to $4 than $3. So that's good news. Although this is flying a little bit lower on the radar, there was an important event, and that is that Iraq's electrical customs system is fully operational right now. And this system allows for the elimination of corruption, which has taken place really since 2003. And it also expands the national revenue, which is critical to all of the international agencies that want to see Iraq go beyond being a one-trick pony with the revenue from the sale of petroleum, but involving the industry, involving industry, agriculture, import and export, and even tourism. So this is good news as well. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what's going on in the Parliament. And, of course, over the last, well, I'd say about 6 months, we've had the Sadrists, the coalition framework, and then the newly established tripartite coalitions all vying for control. But it seems at this point, and in my opinion, that the Sadrists finally have the upper hand. I think that some of the moves that he made that were questioned a few months ago are turning out to have been kind of Machiavellian and working out just as he had anticipated. What the Sadrists recently done is they've staged a sit-in protest at Parliament and then pulled it back. But they were able to shut everything down. So what I think the Sadrists were doing was establishing that they are the preeminent political force in Iraq. We also know that the Sadrists have been successful in exposing the weak coalition which is the coalition framework. which are Shia, but they range from very moderate Shia like Abadi or even Sudani to some of the more radical or most radical, which is Maliki. So by exposing the weakness of the coalition framework, Sadrists have also in the process of defanging Maliki. As a matter of fact, Sadr himself has called out Maliki and says he should present himself to the Supreme Judicial Council if he feels he's innocent and provide and would demand that they provide evidence of his corruption. And of course, we know that's the last thing Maliki wants to do. So he's sort of been forced into silence. And the last thing, and this shows that Sadr's also playing the long game, and he's a nationalist. What he's basically saying is it's time to move away from the parliamentary system of Iraq and move to a presidential system. Now, those of you who have been kind enough to listen to our calls know that I've always had a problem with the parliamentary system. In my view, it's a complicated system. It breeds, in my opinion, corruption because there's all kinds of deals taking place behind the scenes, which I don't think government should be run that way. Whatever's going on ought to be front and center for everyone to see. And add to that in Iraq the sectarian and tribal issues involved. So the parliamentary system has proven not to work very well in Iraq. If you go to probably the most prestigious parliamentary system, and perhaps the longest standing, would be in England. If you want to see how that operation works, just go to a C-SPAN someday and listen to a parliamentary session. And in my view, it reminds me more of the food fight scene in Animal House than a judicious body that is negotiating, say, certain legislation. On the other hand, English is the language of the English people, and the surgical quips that go back and forth are rather entertaining, but again, it's rather difficult to get things done in a parliamentary system. Now, our system isn't, I mean, look at what's going on right now. There are times when things aren't working out, but generally it's when some side is trying to do something above and beyond their constitutional ability to do so. So I think the move long-term to a presidential system is basically saying it's time to put the sectarian issues aside and develop a nation state for all Iraqi citizens. And, of course, that moves the needle in the right direction for us. So at this point, it seems to me there are three possible scenarios, and this is why I say the reinstitution of the dinar could happen at any time. Scenario number one, the parliament forms a new government. In my opinion, if that were to occur, the reinstitution of the dinar would happen almost immediately. It's unlikely that that scenario is going to happen, but if it did, then I think, once again, the dinar would reinstitute. Scenario number two, the parliament fails once again to form a new government, but there's a precedent for the government to be run until another election by a caretaker government. It's happened 2 or 3 times since 2003. And if that's in fact the case, we know that the Kazemi caretaker government and the CBI want to move forward with a change in the exchange rate. So again, I think that the reinstitution of the dinar in country is likely. The third scenario, and this is the one that I did not a while back think was possible, but it could happen. The third scenario is the parliament's continued failure to form a new government could result in the parliament being dissolved with new elections as early as November. If that were to happen, then the caretaker government, at least for that period of time, would without question have full powers, and I think the reinstitution of the dinar would happen almost immediately. So any of these scenarios could lead to the reinstitution of the dinar. So we're probably in a pretty good place right now. It's unfortunate that chaos might be what's necessary for the caretaker government and the CBI to push through. But I'm a Dinarian, and those of you that are listening, I presume, are Dinarians. Most of us have been involved in this for a long period of time. So at this point, we really don't care what gets us there. We just want to go to the bank, do our exchange, and move on down the road. And under the current scenarios, that could very well happen. I think it's more likely that it would than it would not. Now, that being the case, I'd like to spend a little time talking about the program we put in place to assist you. It was over a decade ago that we decided to work with Dinarians. We were Dinarians ourselves. We had other currencies as well. We understood, what the situation was, and we knew that when this event would occur, and it's not an if event, it's just a matter of when, that most of the individuals that had dinar were hardworking middle-class people who, for the first time in their life, would be forced with the daunting task of managing a substantial amount of wealth. So we put a turnkey program in place to assist you. It's a two-phased program. Phase 1 is pre-RV. Phase 2 is post-RV. Pre-RV involves the establishment of a package of pre-RV asset protection trusts with your currencies assigned to that package. Post-RV involves all of the product, services, and professional referrals that will be made available to you after the revaluation of these currencies. But before I get into that, I want to mention one other thing. We in the United States are in a very unusual political situation. The country is pretty much divided. There are those that love this country, love our governmental system, want it to survive. There are those that are unhappy with this country, unhappy with the political system, and in use of their words, want to fundamentally transform the system. So we need to take whatever protections are available to us to ensure that however this thing plays out, our fundamental constitutional rights are not denied us. What we're looking at right now is a high-tax surveillance, and I would call it a high-tax surveillance police state. Why do I call it a high-tax state? Well, we're looking right now at substantial tax increases. Inflation itself is a tax. We've got inflation rates at 9.1% right now. And if the new Inflation Reduction Act were to pass, inflation is just going to tick up. It really annoys me that these government officials continue to troll us by calling things the reverse of what they are. So the Affordable Care Act, of course, created unaffordable health care. Therefore, the Inflation Reduction Act, written by people that caused the inflation, is not going to stop inflation. It's going to increase inflation. Then we have the surveillance issue. We've had officials at the government have to admit under oath that, yes, we've been surveilling individuals. We listen to their calls. We read their texts. We do all of that. But one thing we know for sure is all of a sudden, big tech is involved in wholesale censorship of conservative commentary or anything that they don't seem to like. We ourselves had issues with YouTube because once politics got involved in these discussions on a weekly basis, all of a sudden we were having problems with YouTube. Now, we got those resolved, and I can't repeat some of the things I needed to say to certain individuals to make sure that this problem went away, but it was resolved. Police state is a harsh term, but an unarmed citizenry is by definition a police state, and you can see everything that they can do to try to separate citizens from their right to possess firearms, our Second Amendment right, they're attempting. Now, I'm bringing all this up because these trusts operate under the Fourth Amendment, and the Fourth Amendment is very important in a high-tax surveillance state, more important than ever. I want to read briefly for you the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, explain to you why these trusts are important. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by an oath of affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, this is important because when you establish a family asset protection trust, that's what we're offering to you, and that's what I'm going to be discussing in detail. You have told the IRS and the federal government that you have been proactively protecting your Fourth Amendment right to privacy, and that they better have a very good reason for attempting to pierce that trust. Now let's talk a little bit about the options that we have, not only in terms of privacy, but in terms of asset protection. Now, this applies as we speak specifically to those of us that have currencies that have dinar, but this would apply to anyone that has property or assets that they are anticipating a substantial increase in value. This is precisely the time that you want to transfer the asset out of title to a trust. But let's talk about the other options that you have. For example, some individuals establish LLCs, sub-S corporations, family limited partnerships. Now, these entities do provide some level of asset protection, but primarily dividing business assets and the risk inherent in some business assets with personal assets. The reason this is not a good fit for dinarians is because the possession of these currencies is a personal asset. In addition, courts have ruled that LLCs and sub-S corporations that are owned in the majority by a single individual or a closely held group like a married couple or a family can be pierced for civil litigation. So they're not going to provide the privacy and the asset protection we're going to need and want. Then there is something called a revocable living or loving trust. Now, these are statutory trusts established on a state-by-state basis, primarily to exempt your estate from probate and, if properly structured, to substantially reduce and in some cases even eliminate the federal estate tax. However, these trusts can provide no privacy or asset protection, so they're going to be inappropriate for our needs. All of these assets that I've described thus far are statutory in nature, are regulated by the state, usually require management fees, and you forfeit any privacy. Now, there is the single irrevocable trust, and that certainly does provide much more privacy and asset protection than the entities I just previously mentioned. However, even the individual irrevocable trust has an inherent flaw, and it's this. Everything you own, all of your assets are within that one trust or entity. So if any asset within that entity gets involved in civil litigation, that could necessarily bring all of your other assets and net worth into that litigation as well. The solution to this problem is to establish a family, and I use the word family now because we're going beyond the dinar. We're talking about protecting yourself from intrusive government. The family asset protection trusts are the best asset protection available domestically, period. And it's because they're not only irrevocable trusts, but it's a family of trusts. These are the vehicles used by politicians, by athletes, by wealthy individuals, and I'll explain precisely why that's the case. But first I want to talk about, for those of you that have currencies, why not only this package is necessary, but that it must be established prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. First, this trust package provides privacy and anonymity because the assets within the package are sealed, meaning that the general public will have no knowledge of your net worth or actual holdings. Second, by establishing this package, you will be avoiding personal IRS scrutiny once these currencies revalue. If you are holding these currencies in direct title when they revalue, the IRS could spit out an audit. And with the potential magnitude of this revaluation relative to your prior year's earnings, you're probably looking at a full-blown 6-year audit. Such an audit would be time-consuming, It would certainly be frustrating because it's come along at the precise time these currencies have revalued, and there's many other things you'd much rather be doing than dealing with some IRS agent. And third, the cost of a 6-year IRS audit would be more than the cost of this trust package. So by establishing this package and transferring the currencies to the trust pre-RV, you've accomplished two things. First, there's less than a 10% chance of an IRS audit if this revaluation were to occur within a rather sophisticated trust package such as ours. And second, even if the IRS determines to audit your trust, it's going to be over quickly because they can't do a 6-year audit. Why? Because the only taxable event within the trust will be the revaluation itself, one single transaction. The third reason you'd want to establish this trust package is if you plan on gifting currencies to family and friends. Now, philanthropic gifting can always be done on a tax-preferred basis, either pre- or post-RV. But in order to avoid a substantial 40% federal gift tax, you're going to need to give currencies to family and friends prior to the revaluation. Now, if you're gifting to individuals that you have no problem giving them the currency to exchange for themselves, or giving them the U.S. dollar lump sum after you have negotiated the exchange for them, that can be accomplished outside of the trust with a standard gift letter. But if you are hesitant for any reason to give these individuals the post-RV lump sum, then you can gift to them through our specially designed gift subtrust, which is part of our package. And because you're gifting through this subtrust, their U.S. dollars will be protected along with yours. In addition, you will have complete control of those funds, meaning that you can manage, invest, and distribute those monies to those individuals as you deem appropriate. And this is an important benefit if you have minor children, individuals that may be disabled, you may have older individuals that you feel are irresponsible or just unable to manage substantial amounts of money. But whatever the situation is, you will be in control of the post-RV proceeds. The fourth reason you'd want to establish this trust package is that it's structured in such a way as to allow you to avoid the cost and delay of probate and the federal estate tax. So I'll give you two quick scenarios. Scenario number one, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs an estate of $25 million. Now that estate must go through probate, a process that ordinarily can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. But probate is a public disclosure process, meaning that the general public will be aware of the size of your estate, who your heirs are, and how much they each stand to inherit. So if anyone feels they have a legitimate claim against you, your estate, or your heirs, they can simply file that claim with the probate court. And that could tie the estate up for years and even decades. And your heirs will have either limited access or no access at all to their respective inheritance till the probate process is completed. Then there's something called the federal estate tax. This is the tax that the federal government would assess in order for that estate to be transferred to heirs. Under current law, approximately $10 million of that $25 million estate would bypass any federal estate tax, but the balance could be taxed as much as 65%. Now, this scenario is not only unacceptable, it's completely and totally avoidable. How? Scenario number two, you purchase 5 million dinar for $5,000. The day after that, you assign those currencies on paper to our asset protection trust package. The day after that, those currencies revalue for $25 million. The day after that, you pass away, leaving your heirs that very same estate of $25 million, but this time protected in our asset protection trust package. As a result, there will be no probate. There will be no public disclosure of your estate. Your heirs will have immediate access to their respective inheritance, and the federal estate tax will be zero, saving your heirs as much as 55% of their inheritance. The fifth reason you'd want to establish this pre-RV asset protection family trust package is for some very specific asset protection benefits. One pre-RV, one post-RV. Pre-RV, this trust package will allow you to circumvent the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. Now, what does that mean? Under our system of civil procedure, you can only be sued for what you actually own in direct title or the value of property at the time you transfer it out of title to an entity like our trust package. So let's take the previous example from before. You purchased 5 million dinar, assign those to our trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. You begin to live a lifestyle more reflective of your newfound wealth, and a couple of years down the road, someone sees that you're living rather comfortably and decides for whatever reason that they're going to sue you. Well, this prospective plaintiff has a couple of problems. First, he or she better have a very strong case and very deep pockets, because this trust has been structured in such a way as to make it extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming to pursue civil litigation. But second, and most importantly, once any prospective plaintiff learns that pursuant to the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, the only thing they could ever win by way of a civil lawsuit would be $5,000, the value of the currency at the time you transferred it out of title to the trust, and none of the post-RV value of $25 million, there will be no lawsuit. Post-RV, there's a benefit I like to refer to as limited liability stop loss. This protects you from future bad acts after you have acquired this wealth. This protection is accomplished through a legal strategy called segregation of assets, and this is how it would work. Once again, we'll use the same scenario. You purchase 5 million dinar, transfer the currencies to the trust. They subsequently revalue for $25 million. Now that you have $25 million in trust, you decide to make some purchases. So you purchase a larger primary residence, a vacation home, perhaps a half a dozen rental properties for tax write-off and additional cash flow, a couple of cars, a boat, and let's say an RV. But as you purchase these items, you place each of them in their own separate subtrust to be managed by your master trust. Now, how does this protect you and your wealth from future bad acts? Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say one day you're driving one of your new cars. You have an accident. The accident is clearly your fault, and tragically someone is seriously injured or even killed. Well, the family of the victim is going to want to sue you. But remember, civil suits are about monetary awards, and you don't legally own anything. So the plaintiffs would be left to sue the owner of the car that you were driving. Well, who owns that car? One of your subtrusts, of which you are merely the beneficiary. Well, what's in that subtrust? Merely that one car and the car insurance policy. In that scenario, the car insurance carrier will negotiate an out-of-court settlement with the victim's family. You will not be involved in those rather unpleasant negotiations. The car insurance carrier will repair or replace your car, making you whole, and all of your other assets and net worth are safely protected in the other subtrusts. Why? Because the other subtrusts are separate legal entities or persons, and the plaintiffs would have no standing to pursue a separate legal entity or person that has nothing whatsoever to do with the accident. They weren't the driver of the car or the owner of the car. So your package of trusts work very much the way a commercial barge would work, where all of the valuable cargo is stored in a series of small compartments. Why? In the event that any compartment is ever breached, the only potential loss would be the cargo in that one compartment. The cargo in the other compartments is safe and secure due to the firewalls, and the barge will never sink. Now, these benefits are lost to you if you do not establish your family asset protection trust prior to the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. Now, there is one other benefit, and it's this. If you are, in fact, the holder of one of our pre-RV asset protection trust packages, then you will be eligible to participate in Phase 2, all of the products and services that will be made available to you after the revaluation of the dinar and these other currencies. Now, I'll make quick mention of two of them here. First, after the dinar reinstitutes in country, we will then go to the participating banks, let them know that we at Trust Unlimited have a very large client base of dinarians that have a very substantial amount of currency. We'd be willing to instruct them to go to your bank to do their exchange in return for reduced transaction fees and the best street rate available. So by doing just that, that could be literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference by making those two tweaks. Second, Trusts Unlimited will be sponsoring a post-RV seminar to be held hopefully in Disney World, Florida, approximately 30 days after the revaluation globally of the Iraqi Dinar. Now, we're starting to get some jazz from Disney because of the COVID variant, and we're getting going into the fall. So if we're unable to do that, we will be sponsoring an in-office seminar. We'll probably be issuing a DVD and putting it on our website and available through email for those that want to participate in that. That's going to be a very informative session. Of course, the staff of Trust Unlimited will be assisting everyone with the management and funding of their trust packages. In addition, we'll have our tax specialists there as well. With this newfound wealth, you're going to want to take advantage of all the legitimate tax strategies, particularly given the tax environment we find ourselves in today. We're also going to have our independent fee-based wealth managers there as well, because it's important that you reposition assets for a number of reasons. First, we know statistically that 95% of all windfalls, however large and from whatever source, are lost within 3 to 5 years due to inexperience, mismanagement, and fraud, and we certainly don't want to see that happen to anybody. Second, we know that the revaluation of these currencies is going to create volatile financial markets and inflation, and so we want to transition a substantial amount of our wealth to tangible assets. We also know the general global shift from fiat-based to commodity-backed Basel III compliant currencies in and of itself is going to create more inflation and volatility, particularly for fiat currencies. Lay on top of that the government's move now to digital currencies, so we're going to want to be out of currencies, which, of course, we have no control of the digital currency. You can only do two things with a digital currency. You can leave it with the central bank, or you can exchange it for a good or service. But you will not have control of a digital currency the way you do hard currency. So once again, we want to transition to tangible assets as quickly as we can. Now, our trust package is initially a package of 10 trusts consisting of one master trust that will hold your assigned currencies pre-RV and financial assets like bank accounts and investment accounts post-RV, one gift subtrust, which is an optional subtrust which can be converted to a standard subtrust, and 8 additional standard subtrusts to hold physical assets like homes, cars, boats, etc. Now, this was the simplification of a rather sophisticated trust package that we've utilized in the past for our more affluent kinds, a package that had an initial cost of anywhere from $6,000 to $10,000. But when we decided to put a program together for dinarians, we understood that that package was going to be unaffordable for many. So by simplifying the structure, we've been able to reduce the cost to $3,000. Now, there are several ways you can pay for that. Pay us up front. We'll discount the price further to $2,500, saving you an additional $500. If that's not possible, we do have a deferred payment arrangement. You'd make an initial payment of $525, which sum would basically offset our out-of-pocket costs just to produce and deliver your trust to you. The balance of the $3,000 would then be paid in $100 monthly installments. We will charge no interest. The only proviso is once the revaluation of the Iraqi dinar occurs, any unpaid balance would then need to be paid within 30 days. So with the deferred payment approach, anyone that has currencies and understands the need for getting their affairs in order and their trust enforced pre-RV should be in a position to afford to do so. One other suggestion, we do accept credit cards. Pay us up front with a credit card. Not only will you get the $500 discount, but the minimum payment on your card would be substantially less than $100 a month you'd pay us under our deferred payment arrangement. But we will work with you in whatever method works best for you. Our objective is to help you get your affairs in order and your trust enforced pre-RV for all of the reasons that we've stated here. Now, we will be going to a Q&A in a moment, but before we do, and for the benefit of our newer callers, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Trusts Unlimited and why you should seriously consider contacting us to get our initial no-obligation package. Our family trust package was authored by our attorney, Robert Bly. He's been a practicing attorney for over 40 years, specializing in the areas of estate planning, asset protection, and offshore planning. I myself hold degrees in political science, macroeconomics, and finance. I've worked in these areas for nearly 40 years, and I, along with my clients, were personally involved in the reinstitution of the Kuwaiti dinar in the early 90s. So between the two of us, Robert Bly and I have 80 years' experience working precisely in these areas, and I frankly know of no firm that can make that claim. But this is important for you to understand, because under our system of civil litigation, it's when you hold assets in direct title that you can lose control of them. And invariably, it's at precisely those times that you need and want control. If you've lived for any length of time, you've experienced directly in your own life or through friends and family things like unexpected divorce, permanent incapacitation, the onset of dementia, premature death, and prolonged and complicated probate processes. Then there are investment losses, business losses, and even bankruptcies. The number 2 loss of wealth now in the aggregate, courtesy of the information age, is identity theft. But the number 1 loss of personal wealth remains confiscation through civil litigation. Anything you own in direct title can be taken from you. So in point of fact, the only way that you can manage, protect, and control everything at all times and in all circumstances is through the establishment of a package of irrevocable trusts, and particularly if you have an asset like these currencies that you're anticipating a substantial increase in value. And we at Trusts Unlimited will do everything we can to help you accomplish your personal and financial objectives, both pre- and post-RV as we understand them. So thanks so much for listening to our call. I'm going to attempt to go to the Q&A. The reason I say attempt is because we've been having problems with this new format, but I'm going to give it a shot here. So I'm going to try to go to Q&A. Well, it looks like it's working thus far. While I'm waiting for any potential calls, I'd like to give you our contact information, especially if you'd like to contact us to learn more about us and get our initial no-obligation package. You can go to our website, which is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc.com. Our email is trusts with an S, unlimitedllc@gmail.com. And our phone service is 307-274-4122. Contact us. We'd be more than happy to send you our no-obligation initial package. Has a lot of information about us, about trust, about the revaluation. It does contain everything you need should you decide to request the establishment of a trust. But again, that's entirely up to you. You can review the package, contact us by phone or email if you have any questions. We'll be happy to assist you in every way, and there will be no consultation fee. We have a couple of callers in the queue here. Our first caller is area code 347. That's 347. Go ahead. (347), are you there? I lost 347.
Hello, Jim?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Jim, this is Clay. This is Clay. This isn't 347 though, but that's when I said hello. It's to ask your question, so I don't know how to get turned around.
Well, I lost 347. I don't know whether they hung up or I messed up, but hopefully they'll call back in. But what's up, Clay?
It's all good, my friend. I wanted to ask you a question about Kuwait. And what I wanted to ask you was, I was listening to Sandy. She's an accountant of sorts, and she was explaining how the Kuwait dinar revalued. And it's almost identical to the way Iraq is kind of twisting and turning things around to confuse people so there won't be a run on the dinar. But they kept the 9, and then eventually, boom, they just revalued it. But I remember in one of your commentaries, you said that you did not. The only way that you could revalue or get the exchange was to go to Kuwait, because I guess when Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait, he went into all their bank vaults, stole all their money, stole gold, precious metals, this, that, and the other. And so the Kuwait government canceled a lot of those notes that were stolen. And then those notes were recreated by, I believe, Sweden and Germany. So they had a whole new currency. But for those that had those notes, literally had to go to Kuwait. Is that true?
Yeah, well, that's what we had to do. And we actually hired someone to go there for us. We were, as I recall, we had 90 days to do the exchange. We had to provide a bunch of paperwork. This individual went over there, and the deal was we had to pay all of his expenses plus 15%. So we went from, I think, the group, we bought between 10 and 15 cents per dinar, per Kuwaiti dinar, what it cost, changed it for 346. But the odd thing about it is, I know what you're saying, what they were trying to do to stop a run on it, but what happened was the thing went up over $7, as I recall. So a lot of people actually lost money because they were buying it, at 4, 5, 6, close to $7, and then and all of a sudden it flew back down to 3 something, and so they lost money. So you got to be, it's sort of like an IPO. You got to time it right, or you could end up getting hurt.
So my question is when you cashed yours in, when it initially revalued, did it reinstate, or did it come in at a lower value? According to Sandy, it came in at 47 cents to the dollar. And then they said, hey, for all those holding dinar, you need to come exchange it while you have the opportunity in that 90-day period. Did it stay at 47 cents for that 90 days?
No.
Or did you cash yours in at the reinstated value?
We cashed in over $3, but I'm embarrassed to tell you how little I'd invested in it, because that was my first rodeo with this thing. But that whole thing was over in like 20 months. We're going 20 years.
Right,
with Iraq. So it's kind of hard to compare them. One of the reasons things were chaotic then is because they were moving quickly, and because it did involve the outright invasion of another country. What's going on in Iraq is corruption within the country. So it's in some ways it's the same, and in some ways they're diametrically opposed. But I think one of the reasons the government is having they're having trouble with the new government up to now has been the coalition framework, because a lot of the people in the coalition framework do not want to see the dinar reinstitute and revalue, because they know that's going to result in a lot of international contracts and mutual banking agreements globally, and then Iran will lose its little piggy bank, Iraq.
Well, that was the whole reason for the abolishment of the parliament, was to clean out of all those arrangements out of there. But this, the other side of that, too, is there are those out there that feel the government's formed, and that the food and security law is the new budget, and that it's going to come forward in October, which will represent their fiscal year, October to March, in which case, if that's the case, it'll reinstate at that time, and that all of this chaos, these demonstrations and the solderist and the coalition framework is all smoke and mirrors until they're ready to do that reinstatement. In fact, as you're aware, Kademi and the Parliament and the Council have passed 2 laws with the interim government. And the way I understand it, they're not supposed to pass laws, and the court hasn't gotten involved regarding the Constitution on their on how broad they can be as far as what they can do in government.
Well, the court did make a statement, and you're right. Initially, they were saying, well, the caretaker government can't do anything. Well, then what's the purpose of a caretaker government? If they can't do anything, then there's still no government. So that's not the case. That course got kicked to the curb, and you're right, when they passed other laws. So if they passed other laws, and then when we talk about the reinstatement, that's not a situation where it's the purview of the caretaker government. The CBI has unilateral authority on that as well, and they're going along. They think it's Kazemi, Salih, and al-Habussi. That's the best three you could probably have because they're moderate Shia, which appeals to the Shia, and the Sunnis are, they're willing to accept. Kazemi has shown himself to be a nationalist and not a sectarian leader like, Maliki would be, a pro-Iranian sectarian. So, it's all good. Now, you're right that if they could reinstate when they passed a new budget, but having passed a food security law, there's no reason the CBI can't just go ahead. Why can't we have the rate before the budget? We don't have to have the budget before the rate. As a matter of fact, I would argue I'd rather have the rate before the budget because expenditures of the government pursuant to the budget are based on the currency. And so I would want it reinstated. That's why they were saying before, well, we passed the budget. We can't reinstate now because now we'd have to reconfigure the budget, to which I said, well, so what? Then redo it.
Well, the problem is, though, they haven't presented a budget at all. They've talked about it, and they've talked about the food and security law, but they haven't implemented the food and security law. It carries a lot of those reforms in there, which means that is the budget. And in order to implement it, they're going to have to show us the rate. I
agree. That's my point. The chicken and the egg. To me, again, I think the rate should come before the budget. And what they were arguing, okay, we'll pass the budget. We just won't make any expenditures till they change the rate. Remember, they pulled that and they had to borrow money and do all that crazy stuff. Just change the damn rate and stop playing around. But again,
I agree.
It's a corrupt faction that's holding it. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I was, and that was part of the call I was getting on, that looked like some of the Iranian militia were going to, start misbehaving in Iraq again because they know that Biden's not going to do anything about it. The guy's a cigar store Indian on the front porch. He's not doing anything. Everything's going on behind the scenes. He probably was the last guy to find out about everything that the government's doing. So it's a mess. It's just a mess. But I just see a window here. I really do, because, like I said, the right people are in place. The CBI has a unilateral authority. A defunct parliament. If the parliament's not going to function, I'd rather they be gone, and just leave a caretaker government there. And then who's going to go to the Supreme Judicial Council and say they can't do that? And the Supreme Judicial Council, who are you? You're the just defunct parliament.
Well, what we don't want to happen is for the people there that are already frustrated to get even more frustrated. Now there's a civil war. Now we're back to square one.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what the pro-Iranian corrupt officials want, because another thing that's coming down the road is the public release of the corruption files, and Maliki really doesn't want that. So, once again, anything they can do to separate themselves from Iran is a good move. And one of the things, and the other thing too, which can help, is Iran wants their currency reinstated and revalued as well, and that's not going to happen if they're screwing around with Iraq. So, maybe we see a window here.
Let's hope so, Jim. I appreciate your time.
Sure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Our next caller here, let's see.
Hello?
Yes. 347.
Yes, this is Praveen. Yes. Okay. Yes, I have a question about the protests in Iraq. Now, with that, I think there's Saturdays that were protesting, I think at the parliament, I believe, or in Baghdad.
That's correct.
Would that help? Yes. Will that push the RP forward, or what will happen?
I think it will help, and I'll tell you why. First of all, just a little history here. Remember, the Sadrists were the ones that were pushing for a nationalist approach, not a sectarian governance. We had the coalition framework established to push back on the Sadrists, and for a while, the coalition framework was making headway, and so Sadr and the Sadrists backed off and said, okay, you guys go ahead and try to form a government. As it turned out, there were a sufficient amount of moderate Shia that were not going along with Maliki and the really pro-Iranian group. The Sadrists got wind of that and established a tripartite coalition, which were the Sadrists and some of the oh gosh, I'm having a senior moment here. The third group. Anyway, that turned out being a stalemate in Parliament. So what Sadr's done is just let his people say, okay, well, let's go do a sit-in at the Parliament and protest the intransigence and the stalemate. They went there, they shut everything down, they couldn't get anything done. Then Sadr went in there and said, okay, we made our point, let's back off and let them proceed. What he did was he exposed to everyone, he showed the other coalitions, you know what, I have the people. The Sadrists are the populist coalition in the country. So we're going to see what's going to happen now. So actually, I think he pushes the ball in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Take care. Okay, that's our last call for this afternoon. Again, I'm glad I had a chance to get on and do a full call. I think I did miss a call I would like to have listened to, but I'll get the notes from that call from some other individuals that are on it. If you like or are interested in the things we've discussed, if you are a Dinarian, if you're concerned about what's going on in this country and you want to protect your wealth, whether you have currencies or not, I strongly suggest you contact us to get our no-obligation package. It has a lot of information about us, about the currencies, about trusts. You can review the package. Contact us if you have any questions. There will be no consultation fee. If you wish to proceed, everything you need is included in the package. Once again, I will not be here next week unless something of a very dramatic nature happens. And so, you know, Murphy's Law, maybe since I'm finally taking a week off and going on vacation, it's all going to pop. I'll be happy to pump the brakes on my vacation if that's the case. But if that is not the case, if that is the case, I will get an emergency email out and schedule an emergency call this Friday. If that's not the case, we will be back in 2 weeks. Next Wednesday, 2 weeks from today, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Bye-bye.